So today we're going to be talking about the conscientiousness factor. Conscientiousness is a trait associated with being focused, hardworking, careful, and diligent. It is the workaholic factor. Conscientiousness, it's associated with duty, aim for achievement, people who strive for success. So that should give you a very good idea of, just sort of the personality of this particular factor. This is often associated with the conscience, as in the word, although I don't think it actually should be associated with the conscience, because I think people can still be enormously misguided when they're high in conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, it can be taken too far often. People who are workaholics, who are perfectionistic, who are OCD. Actually, I'm OCD and have a lot of problems with that may stem, at least in part, from me being a relatively high conscientiousness person. So, as with the other sub-factors, as with the other factors, conscientiousness can be divided into 4 different sub-factors as per the HEXACO model. So the first sub-factor within conscientiousness is called organization. Organization is a tendency to seek order, particularly in one's physical surroundings. Low scorers tend to be sloppy and haphazard, whereas high scorers keep things tidy and prefer a structured approach to tasks. So organization, when you go into someone who's high in this sub-factor, everything is in its proper place, everything is clean. They know where everything is. They don't leave things just out. They don't leave chaos. You won't find rooms where things are just like strewn everywhere, unless there happens to be some sort of order to that chaos. Some people actually do seem to work that way, myself included, actually. But for the most part, if they're high in the organization sub-factor, then they will not just leave things strewn about. On the other end of organization, you have people who will do exactly the opposite of what I just said. They'll leave everything everywhere. They don't know where everything is. Their office is filled with clutter. It can take them hours to find one little thing because they don't know where they put it. They're not very structured, non-linear in thinking, takes them forever to do even the smallest things because they can't really plan ahead very well. Of course, that one bleeds a little bit into another sub-factor called Prudence, which I'll cover in a few minutes. So the next sub-factor is diligence. Diligence is a tendency to work hard. So these are the people who are super focused. Diligence is often referred to as grit, G-R-I-T, which is just like another title. People who can stay on one thing and do it for a long period of time. They'll study something. They'll be working hard for hours and hours and hours on end. They're strongly motivated to achieve. They have enormous self-discipline, enormous work ethic. They're willing to exert themselves. So high diligence characters are all about hard work, whereas the low diligence characters are the guys who just like stand around, don't do anything. They might, depending on their extroversion, they might, talk with other people a lot, but they're not really gonna get a whole lot done. Low diligence is always the last people to get started on something. I think you get the idea. So the third subfactor is perfectionism. Perfectionism is a tendency to be thorough and concerned with details. So perfectionistic people, it has to be done properly. If taken with organization, then these are the people who need everything in complete, perfect order. Of course, perfectionism is its own sub factor. So, unique to it, basically, it means um, everything has to be spotless. The high perfectionism, these are the people who tend to be obsessed with cleanliness. They're the people who are always washing their hands. um, the people who will often get on the cases of others for not having done things properly, not having followed the rules. People high in perfectionism, they're often very rule based. I mean, depending on their level of openness to experience, which is an episode I'll do after this one. That one kind of um, determines how perfectionism manifests itself if it's on the high end. So for high openness people, they'll have some fantastic project that everything has to be done. They'll be doing it like art. It all has to be perfect. It all has to be in its proper place. On the other hand, if they're low openness, then their high perfectionism is going to manifest itself as being very rule based. It all has to follow protocol. It all has to be by the book. Um, it's all details, but they don't really think about what the details actually mean. They just have this determination in them that things have to be a certain way because that's just the way it is. Um, I, I will do the openness episode at some point. Hopefully, not too long. I realize that there's been a lot of time between this and the last episode. When in the last one I had said I wouldn't take so long, and it's just because my life is very busy right now, and I wasn't actually expecting it to get this busy. I won't go into why, because this is an episode on the HEXACO model and not my own life, but I just wanted to mention that, I'm sorry, it's been so long between episodes. So back on the conscientiousness factor, let's see, I've covered the first three sub-factors. The fourth and final sub-factor within conscientiousness is called prudence. Prudence is the ability to plan ahead. Prudence is a tendency to deliberate carefully and to inhibit impulses. Low scorers act on impulse and tend not to consider consequences, whereas high scorers consider their options carefully and tend to be cautious and self-controlled. So prudence is all about planning, and to a certain extent, it's also about wisdom. As wisdom is often associated with doing things in a way that's going to work out better in the long run. uh, so a high prudence person, they'll be saving up for a rainy day. They're the people who, they always have large savings accounts. And if this is combined with high perfectionism, they'll be very determined and thorough about keeping savings accounts and other things that are for the long term. This is the complete opposite of being impulsive, because impulsive people who are low prudence, everything is in the moment. They always want to experience the now. They'll spend everything in a bar just so they can chat up some pretty lady or something like that, or go into a casino and gamble and lose everything, and they'll enjoy it in the moment. And it's only after that's all happened that they're like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So that's the low prudence person. The high prudence person would never stand for this. Uh, High prudence, they're I mean, depending on the degree of highness, they might think years ahead. They might have their whole life planned out. Every painstaking little thing that they could do to extend their life in the long term. It's high prudence is all about the concern for consequences, and depending on their agreeableness and age factor, those consequences could extend to other people as well through compassion, or it could be only consequences for themselves and the implications for their own climbing up the social ladder. If they happen to be low in the age factor. Um, so those are the four subfactors: organization, diligence, perfectionism, and prudence. And as I did with the other factors, I also took the liberty of dividing the continuums into discrete regions. So, yeah, I keep this part on paper, not on the computer, just sort of force of habit, I suppose. So, starting and as I did with the others, I'm starting from -3 and going to +3. So, and of course, there's these continuums. They're unbounded. It's probably infinite in both directions, like the others. But this is just -3 to +3 is the region where you're going to find the overwhelming majority of people. Aliens might be outside the range of -3 and +3, but in human experience, they'll generally all be here. So, starting at -3. -3 is called non-societal. Non-societal are, as the name suggests, people who have no belief in society. They'll just sit around, do nothing. Uh, Beggars, people on the street. Not exclusively. Some people can actually live in homes, but if people in this region do live in houses, then they will be dependents. They will not be able to take care of themselves. Um, so these are people who are completely in the moment. They have no work ethic whatsoever. Either, I mean, it might not necessarily be their fault. I'm not trying to sound like I'm explicitly deriding them. I mean, if it's possible to have huge disabilities that prevent them from being higher on the continuum. And in that case, it's really no point in blaming them. But of course, there are also people who actually kind of choose that life. People on the street who just like abandon everything for drugs, that kind of thing. That's also would be non-societal. I think you kind of get the idea. These are people who just they're completely unfocused, completely undiligent, completely in the moment. Um, so now we're moving up to -2, which is impulsive. Impulsive is people who they can have a work life, but if they're down in -2, then they will be an employer's absolute worst nightmare. They will hardly be able to get anything done. They'll constantly be moving between jobs. They'll work like 3 days in something, get fired because they can't get anything done, go somewhere else for 3 days, get fired. Their resume is going to have like hundreds of different positions on it that lasted a very short time, or if they're even less lucky, they just won't be able to find work at all, um, and they may end up on the street anyways. But the difference between -2 and -3 is that in -2 they're actually trying. They won't be trying very hard. I mean, some of them might actually want to. Maybe they have a disability that prevents it, but these are the people who, regardless of if it's their fault or not, these are the people who just, despite their what they might say, despite their wants, they just can't really get anything started, can't really get anything done. Whenever they make a certain amount of money, they'll lose it really quickly. They're very unreliable. When you tell them to do something, they will find ways of not doing it, either of their own volition or just because they don't know how. And then there will be all manner of different excuses for why they couldn't. As I said, this is the worst nightmare of an employer. So now we're moving up to -1, which is play oriented, and these are people that would be, I mean, it's still better to be a little bit higher on the continuum, but these are the people who are less nightmarish in your employer's eyes. So play oriented, they're people who are generally laid back, they're very easygoing. Um, they can do work, they will do work, but they'll do noticeably less than other people. They're not very perfectionistic. They still don't follow rules that much, so it's hard. It's hard to get them to follow different protocols. But unlike the -2 and -3, they are actually capable of getting things done and in the right ways. It will take them longer than people higher on the continuum, and these are the people who will generally have low-end kinds of jobs just because more sophisticated kind of things require people higher on the continuum, but that they will actually be able to hold down a job, and they'll actually have some kind of career, even though it might be low level. Moving further up on the continuum, the balance state, which is just called work-life balance. So these are the people who, as the name suggests, they're always trying to find that sweet spot between their work life and their play life, balancing family and job. So they are dedicated to their work, but they're also equally dedicated to their family and their play life. So this is someone who is enough of a family man that they do they do spend enough time at home that they actually have a presence within their own family. They'll bother to develop connections with other people, but at the same time, they'll also have a strong presence at their work. So work hard, play hard. I suppose that's one way you could put this one. I mean, that's also kind of a model for people higher on the continuum, but work-life balance are the people who are low enough on the continuum that they actually get that play hard thing down as well. Whereas higher on the continuum, it's that they might say it, but it's something that they can less easily do. Um, Moving even further up the continuum, so now we're at +1, which is work oriented. So these are the people who they do have a play life, but they're mostly about their work. When they look at their life, what they see really is the career, and they will do everything in their power to further that career, but not to such an extent that they isolate their family. They will still manage to have a place at home, but that place at home is going to be strongly affected by whatever profession they're actually working at. If they're actually, I won't say. I was going to say doctor, but that tends to be much further on the continuum. That doctors do not have much of a play life at all. Let's see, what kind of profession? I don't know. Office workers, if they're high level office workers, like office managers, that kind of person would probably be a good +1. They're very dedicated to their job, or I'm sorry, office manager. Yeah, office managers. Those are the people that they are very dedicated to their job, but they're not. That they tend not to be so dedicated that they don't have anything outside their work life. They do meet other people outside. They do occasionally go to social gatherings so they can meet people and spend time at home. So you get the idea. So moving up to +2, we now have the professional. So the professional, these are the people who really are all about their career. So these are the people who are, very high level. They're doing sophisticated things within the community, scientists, lawyers, doctors. Um, these are the kinds of people I'm now describing. the people who are all about their career, all about the overarching trajectory of their life within the society. If they do have a family life at all, then that is a family that has to make concessions for their own profession, because these people do not have a lot of time at home. And when they're at work, they have to do their work completely within all the rules, completely spotlessly, completely perfect, especially if they're a doctor. Don't want to be making too many mistakes there, because if you make too many mistakes, then patients who are treated in a bad way can sue you, and they can sue the hospital, and that's a very bad thing. So doctors have to be very, very perfectionistic where that kind of thing is concerned. That's an extremely litigious kind of profession. So I think the doctors are a really good example of what +2 looks like. Also, people who are very high in science, physicists, um, and other people like that in, let's see, uh, biologists, or I mean, to a lesser extent, biology. In biology, I actually have a degree in science, so I'm a little familiar with this. Like in biology, you can get away with things that you probably wouldn't be able to in physics. I do have a degree in physics, so I have some knowledge of that kind of stuff. Um, I wouldn't call myself a professional in physics. I have a bachelor's, but still, I'm fairly. I do have enough knowledge of what they actually do that I could say that people who, the masters or the PhDs, they would be very +2-ish, because there is some super sophisticated stuff going on in the work of a physicist. And also, if you're in other regions of science like chemistry or information technology or engineering, stuff like that, those people tend to be +2-ish as well, very professional. But it's possible to still go even further. So the +3, which is ultra duty. So ultra duty people, these are the hard asses. You find a lot of these in the military. They don't even know what. In the military and super high up. So um, they don't even understand the concept of what it means to have a life outside of their work. Excuse me. Because these are the people who it's all about complete and utter dedication to whatever it is they're doing, utter dedication to country. I mean, the military is not exclusive to this. You can have people like this outside the military, but I think the military is a really great example of what the +3 looks like, because it's everything for what you're doing, everything for this profession. All the rules must be followed. They are absolute. We have to plan for as far in the future as we can, because if you don't plan, then some detail in the world on some mission you're on might kill you. So you get the idea with those. They take conscientiousness so far that oftentimes they'll be really hard to be around. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying everyone in the military is like this. The kind of people I'm describing are people very high up the chain of command. The commanders, oh gosh, I'm kind of forgetting some of the higher level up. Is Major one? I've never been that familiar with like the titles in the military, but yeah, I think you get the idea. The people who tell large numbers of other people what to do. This is what the +3 looks like. So those are the regions. Now, closing comments for the conscientiousness factor. I need to stress that conscientiousness is completely unrelated to IQ. Oftentimes, one is conflated as the other, and actually these two are completely separate. You can be very low in intelligence and be high in conscientiousness. And actually, that's something that's fairly common. When someone is low intelligence, they have a harder time figuring out how to do something, they will compensate for that by being higher in the conscientiousness factor. They will compensate for that by just generally being more hardworking. If they can't do something in a way that is smart and efficient through being able to do problem solving, then they will compensate for that by making sure that they work as hard and do as many tasks as they can, so that they can get as much done as possible. Also, it is true that low conscientiousness is associated with crime, and criminals generally will be respectably low in conscientiousness. But I think just because of history, it's often regarded as that this is the only factor, and that if you know their conscientiousness, you know their criminality, and that is not true. The H factor has a huge amount to do with criminality. Criminals generally, they'll combine low C and low H, because you need both. Because if you're low C but high H, that means you don't have much of a work ethic, but at the same time, you're very selfless. So you're kind of just like the person who's unconditionally helping people, and you help them in ways that you can't see very far ahead. On the other hand, uh, you can be low in the H factor and high in conscientiousness, and in that case, what that looks like is you will do absolutely anything to climb the social ladder. You will do any task. You will um, be as focused and hardworking as is needed to make sure that you succeed. So, people on Wall Street, people who crash the economy so that they can legally steal enormous sums of money to make themselves look better. That's what the high C, low H intersection looks like. So, um, C and H are not the same thing. Criminals generally are low in both. But I would actually say where criminality is concerned, the H factor is more important. People who are low in C, what you need to understand is that um, of course, there are some people who choose a low conscientiousness life, but oftentimes focus problems, ADHD, and that kind of thing can create someone who is a low conscientiousness person, and it's not really their fault. They're low conscientiousness because they don't know how not to be, and it's not really within their blame, and it doesn't mean they're a criminal. If they're high in the H factor as well, then there's no criminality. They're just people who don't really know how to be ordered, don't know how to be structured. And oftentimes the way to solve that problem is to partner them with someone who is structured and can give them that order, and at the same time who is high in C enough that they can understand them. So those are some of the subtleties and nuances. Also, it is possible to take conscientiousness much too high. When conscientiousness is taken much too high, that often results in obsessive compulsive disorder, which is something I suffer from, as it so happens. Um, Obsessive compulsive disorder, for in case you don't know, it's people who obsess over details, and they will often have repetitive behavior to check things or to perform certain tasks over and over and over again because they have a certain subtle anxiety about that thing not being done properly. Before I learned how to try to get a handle on it, I sometimes would check things for like a half an hour straight, just the same thing. And it's something that drove me completely insane for a long time before I figured out how to get a handle on it. It's conscientiousness can be taken too far, and there are problems that happen when it is taken too far. it's important with not just conscientiousness, but all of the different personality continuums to see it more like axes on a map. It's no direction is particularly good or bad necessarily. In certain situations, some coordinate might be more valuable than another coordinate for getting a problem solved, but really you should look at all of these sort of like a map. For any given factor, it's possible to take it too high, possible to take it too low, and there are demons associated with the excesses of both directions. So that's it for conscientiousness. The next episode, the final one, will be on openness to experience, and hopefully that will not take quite so long to get that one done. So that's it for now.